Welcome back, YouTube, to another episode of 10 with Travis, where we take just 10 minutes a day to dive deep into the Word so you can be more equipped today than you were yesterday. In today's episode, we're going to finish out 1 Peter chapter 4. Yesterday, we talked about fervent love and how that can cover a multitude of sins. I hope you were able to identify a weak area in your life, evaluate how love could be put into that situation, and just see how maybe even yesterday, that love was able to cover a multitude of sins. Again, a lot of this is progressionally, so you might have identified it yesterday, but you need to live it out over the next weeks and months, and we would love to hear as that happens in your life and some breakthroughs that you may have. So we will continue the thought of serving for God's glory, ended with verse 8. We'll pick up here with verse 9, which says, "Be hospitable to one another without grumbling." So just like giving financially, grudgingly, is a bad thing, honestly, it's not the right or the way it's supposed to be when you give financially, grudgingly, or with a tight fist. It's the same here with being hospitable with grumbling, right? You don't get anything added to you if you do it with grumbling or complaining. And that grumbling and complaining can be outward with words, or it can be a heart. And again, we've talked a lot about on this channel, a lot of us stuff is heart matters, so don't have a complaining heart or a grumbling heart when you're being hospitable to other people. Really learn how to be hospitable with the fervent love that Peter described. So verse 10 says, "As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God." So as God gives us gifts, we are to use them to serve others for His glory. So now this could be physical gifts or spiritual gifts. And by physical, I mean like natural, like it could be, a financial blessing that you're supposed to move and pass on as well. But the Greek word is charisma. And many times when you hear that word, that's actually directly related to spiritual gifts. And this brings to remembrance when we talked about Ephesians chapter 4, 11 through 16, when Paul went through the spiritual gifts and how it was used to edify and build up the body of believers. So moving on to verse 11, we won't commentate too much on this, but it'll be a nice wrap up for serving for God's glory. And this is what it says. Sorry, I lost my place. It says, "If anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it with the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen." So that will wrap it up for the serving for God's glory. So now we're going to go into verses 12 through 19, which talk about suffering for God's glory. And I want you to go ahead and read these verses after this video as well. If you hadn't before, remember, you should hopefully read the verses before so you can have a little bit of a background knowledge as we talk about them. But I do want you to read them after, because we're only going to talk and touch on a small part, something that God's attention, or God really drew my attention to as I was studying this. So verses 12 through 13 say, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. But rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when His glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy." So again, right there we see Peter telling us, don't be surprised when these things come to you, which is important why we read the Word, because we are prepared and ready for all of life's situations. So for me, I always usually err on the side of the kind of belief that the more we receive from God, or the more we learn about God, the more understanding and revelation we have from God, then the more we receive from God, whether that's health, that's better relationships, that's financially, that's more peace, that's more joy, all those types of things. The more we get of God, internally, the more kind of natural things we also may get from God. So when I think about that, I kind of ask God, how does suffering and persecution, which a lot of times might lead to some lack and things like that, kind of line up with those areas of my belief of, God is here to prosper, bless, to advance us, to get us to continue to go from glory to glory to glory and have more on this earth, to enjoy earth more. So here's something that I feel like He said to me when I was studying it, and I hope it is freedom for a lot of you. So most of us will suffer, or commonly more known as, have mistreatment from others around us. So now being treated poorly because of something what you did is totally different from what Peter's talking about here. He did talk about that in some previous chapters. So for example, getting fired from your job because you're lazy, you can't say, oh, I'm suffering for Christ because my boss is a Christian and he let me go. No, you have to evaluate and know the circumstance that you just got fired for being lazy. So there is a fine line in there. So that was kind of part of it, but kind of off on a tangent. But let me go into exactly what I feel like God told me regarding suffering for us New Testament believers, that lived 2,000 years after this was written. And the thing I want you to notice, again, as you read it for yourself, is two words that appear in verse 14 and 16. So in verse 14 it says, if you are reproached for the name of Christ, and then verse 16 says, yet if anyone suffers as a Christian. So the two words that are common there is Peter using the words if and not when. So it doesn't say when you are reproached for the name of Christ, and it doesn't say yet when anyone suffers as a Christian. It says if, as in who knows. And as believers, again, I think if we are to expect great things to happen to us both in the natural world and the supernatural. So sometimes our natural minds can't always think about the supernatural or what God's plan may be. So again, another way to kind of back that up is, we have the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world, which is 1 John 4:4. So we should expect good things to happen to us. We should expect to defeat and trample over Satan. So the word choice that Peter uses will allow us to kind of mature a little bit in understanding for him using if and not when. So the reason that I believe God told me that he used if and not when is just the source where the suffering is coming from. So since it says if, that means the source is outside of God. That is the world, that is people. If it was when, that would be God saying, hey, when this happens, as in he knows, he's expecting, he's giving it, right? He's the one doing it. But the if is kind of the outside source. So again, from context, it would just be the devil. So this is where we as believers and God himself come in. So again, it's if we suffer, so we know that it's the devil, but yet we as Christians, along with God, use anything the devil tries to do to turn it for God's glory. And that's why it's suffering for God's glory. It's the devil throwing something on you for God's glory, because he thinks that he is knocking you down and he thinks he is, stopping something great, but many times he is starting something great. And one perfect example is Jesus. So the devil thought he was ending Jesus' ministry, thought he was ending what Jesus was trying to come to do by hanging him on the cross. But actually, it was just the very beginning for God. So that's how it is in our lives as well. When the devil throws suffering at us, when the devil throws persecution at us, we know that the devil thinks it's the end of something, but with God, it is truly the beginning of something great. So verse 16 is huge for us too, because it says not to be ashamed during suffering. And the reason I want to call this out is a lot of times when we get suffering and persecution, we think, God, what did I do wrong? What sin do I have in my life? How can I stop this? But that's not the case, right? We are walking in step with God, and the devil throws something at us because that's how life works. And again, that's what it says when we're really living this Christian life. There's going to be opposition out there because the devil wants to try to slow it down. So instead of blaming ourselves, or even better, instead of seeing someone else have that suffering and blaming them or wondering, hey, what did they do wrong to get that? We have to know that it is the devil trying to put suffering and persecution on us. Nothing we did, we can't be ashamed, but yet we just thank God for it because we know his glory will be made through that suffering. So that does it for today. If this has blessed you or this channel has blessed you and you'd like to give to the network, please see the ways below. If you have questions or comments, definitely please reach out as well. Let's continue the challenge that I spoke about at the beginning, which was from last episode, to identify those areas of weaknesses, put the fervent love on it, and see it cover a multitude of sins. Again, that's a process. That wasn't a one-day challenge, but that's an ongoing challenge. So as you do that, again, please comment or email some testimonies from that. And again, as you go about your day, just remember that the suffering is not from God. The persecution is not from God. Yes, we are going to turn it around and use it for His glory, but it's not from Him. So we need to have an expectation that God will advance us in this world. And as He does that, the devil is going to try to step in the way. We need to fight and stand firm to get past the devil.